Hi, I'm Damian Wolfman, single, Gemini, emotionally available, and trying really hard to prevent a bloodbath in the streets of Orlando. Just because I live in the most magical place on earth does not mean all that magic is kind. It is a full-time job keeping mundane humans from getting eaten, enchanted, or enslaved by the supernatural world. Luckily, for me, most creatures just need one good whack of my charm bat to keep them in line. That's until the local vampire clan decided to open up a nightclub in the middle of a touristy part of town, and during peak tourist season, no less. The art of secrecy seems to be lost on them as people begin to go missing around their club. As an enforcer of the balance, this means I need to step in. The vampires don't take too kindly to someone like me poking around, asking questions, and accidentally uncovering their evil scheme to create an army of bloodsuckers to overthrow my boss. I either need to come up with a plan or ask for a raise. There you
She
go.
does.
Hi, Wes. Thanks for joining. Is there anything you want to, say or introduce to everyone before we jump into the questions?
Hi, Chris. I'm Wes, for those who don't know, and thank you for that amazing introduction. Unbalanced and Unprepared is actually an offbeat urban fantasy. There is vampires in there, but we'll go more into the depths on the layers and what role they play. It really comes down. It's the story of my protagonist, Damian Wolfman, who is a human raised by werewolves, and I really love what I've done with him. He's the gentleman with the bat and blood on my cover right there, for those who are wondering. And yeah, I'm really excited about even talking about my other books that I did self-publish. That's why I was going for Unbalanced and Unprepared was originally going to be self-published because I do have experience with that. And yeah, 2026 is not that far. It's less than Roman Reigns' title reign.
What inspired you to write this book?
All right, so for this book was actually came from inspiration from a different book I was writing. When I sat down and wanted to write Damien's book, I originally had a little more heavy metal side to it. In fact, the working title of it was Bloodbath in Paradise, the song by Ozzy Osbourne, and I wanted the series because I want this to be a series, and I wanted it to be named after heavy metal songs. So Bloodbath in Paradise was going to be the first one, but when I was writing it, there was a lot of lore I had to uncover, and I was like, things I'm talking about in the draft I was writing, that was about 3 chapters in when I was like, there's a lot to unpack here. I'm like, this is like a good book 3 or book 4. So I'm like, what can I do to make this better? Not better, but easier to digest. So I'm like, okay, what's the actual plot? What's the actual character? So I was like, okay, now I basically thought of Harry Dresden and how Dresden Files has 20 damn books out there, and all the other great books out there that has multiple sequels. So I'm like, what would be a good first book in a series that would be want people to launch? And I'm like, can't go wrong with vampires. Vampires is an easy concept, so I wanted to create a vampire story with Damien in it. So I stopped what's going to be book 3, spoiler alert. I stopped 3 chapters into book 3 and started on Unbalanced and Unprepared, and I got that done, and I think it works a lot better than just jumping in with a deep lore.
Tell us about Damien. Tell us about not only Damien, tell us about any of the other main characters that pop up in this book. Spoiler free if you can manage it, and what drives them.
Oh, I'll be happy to. So, Damian Wolfman is a human raised by werewolves, and I loved writing this guy. So I write in first person, so I was in his head the entire time, and I'm in his head now as I write the sequel. And with him, he's unique because he has untreated ADHD, just like I do, because I was diagnosed later as an adult with ADHD. So I kind of took that inspiration, what's in my mind, cranked it to 11, and said, okay, what if I'm in a magical realm, not a magical realm, but the magical world existed, and I was raised by werewolves and from the Midwest. So that's why I took the old pro wrestling adage of you want to take yourself and crank it to 11, and I did just that. My love of heavy metal, 90s aesthetics. In fact, he actually makes jokes. Although Damien himself is 25. I based him how I was as a teenager. So I was like, okay, a little bit like that, but more modern, if you will. So that's who Damien was. Untreated ADHD, headbanger, just like hitting things with a baseball bat. His brother is Dave. And everyone, when I tell people about this concept, everyone loves this because Dave is Damien's roommate. Dave is obsessed with true crime podcasts. That comes very important in all the stories. Damien,
relatable, I think, to a lot of people in this chat.
Oh yeah, very much so. I know a lot of people my wife got me into true crime podcasts, so I was like, I gotta do something. Dave is also a stoner. Straight, and so because again, Damien is raised by werewolves. That means Dave is a werewolf. So he is a stoner werewolf obsessed with true crime podcast, and I just loved writing for him. Because
what a concept!
Thank you, Sarah, for seeing the Midwest rep. Yep, that's gonna be heavily replied in the sequel too, with the Midwest representation. But Dave was fun to write because you have this guy who's obsessed with true crime. He sees conspiracies everywhere. Very technological, savvy, but all he wants to do is just get high. And I think he's like great sidekick for Damien, who is high strung.
Relatable.
As they should be. I mean, we all need a stoner sidekick who loves true crime. Am I right?
Oh yeah. What so you've only mentioned two people, which is totally fine. But there's the chemistry that you've set up in those couple short sentences is really great. I mean, you have this guy raised by werewolves who is sort of, it seems like he's protecting the average Joe from different monstrosities, different supernatural beings, while being raised himself by a bunch of supernatural beings. And then a brother who is, on top of it all, obviously a werewolf, but a stoner. And it's a really cool dynamic. I'm going to go ahead and buy the book right now.
Oh, thank you.
I'm going to put my pre-order in. But so I'm wondering how these characters get tied up into the plot then. Can you kind of, again, without spoilers, go into the plot for us and how you went developing that?
With the plot itself, with vampires, it comes down to corporate greed. Surprisingly.
That's all things do.
As it does, yes. So Damien and Dave, now you read in the blurb that he's the enforcer of the balance. If you notice, the balance is capitalized. That is a concept created by their employer, Atticus. Atticus is an immortal who happens to be a billionaire. Because if you're going to live forever, you might as well have a lot of money. And he basically is like, okay, we're going to, kind of like Supernatural with Sam and Dean. We're going to keep everything separate, but no one crosses the line. Basically, the monsters don't get eaten. Monsters don't get ravaged by the readers of Monster Smut. And that's the actual driving force. That's an actual line in the book too. So Atticus is immortal. He runs a nightclub called Paradisos. And he found out that the vampires opening their own nightclub down the street. And he's like, nah, I don't like that. So he's like, Damien, go tell Mondo Knight, the king of the vampires, who runs the city. And Damien's like, okay, send me? Okay, I'll go unprotected with a bat. So that's where that comes in. And you also find out during that the conversation between Damien and Atticus, you see a lot more of what the balance is, and you meet their potential love interests, because there is there's a subplot of paranormal romance in there.
I got to ask, what kind of research did you do in order to throw all of this together? Were there any niche things you had to look up? Because we have vampires, Valkyries, werewolves, immortal nightclub owners. I mean, there are a lot of themes going on in this book. What research did you specifically do to get those themes kind of in some coherent order?
Oh yeah, you need research. The biggest research I did was because most of the plot, of the action, if you will, took place in International Drive here in Orlando, because that's where the heart of everything was, like the story. So I had to not only just study the map of International Drive, which I worked in the hospitality industry most of my career, so I know it quite well. But I had to know exactly where the distance between Universal Studios to Metro West neighborhood is, for example. So I had to know that distance. I also had to know the history of what building goes where. I had a fantastic what's it called theory I created on why Festival Bay keeps changing owners, and I love it. I can't wait for people to read it and get a laugh at that. Other than that, of course, I had to. I actually have a book on Norse myths and legends. On a personal level, I actually follow the Norse path of Norse paganism, so that is near and dear to my heart. So I have the Prose Edda and a few other retellings of the stories. So Valkyries was easy for me to research because that's what I naturally looked into. And I had to find out what the backstory of other places are, like Atticus. You don't know exactly where he is from, and that's the ambiguity of immortality.
Yeah, I mean, I imagine you live long enough, you don't even remember where you're from at that point. Do you have personally a favorite scene or chapter or just small moment in the book that you can tell us about? Again, without giving anything away.
Yes. Oh my god. Question: are you gonna do that reading of the passage I sent you?
That's up to you. If you'd like me to narrate that, or if you want to do it yourself, completely in your court.
Seeing as how I don't want to mess up I'm on my phone, and it looks like you're actually on your computer, so you could probably your best bet if you read that. But I was going to say, one, that scene is phenomenal. I loved writing that scene, which I won't talk about much. But part two of that, so basically, this, to catch everybody up on that scene you'll read, Damien finally gets a date with Emma the Valkyrie, and it's disastrous as because they get attacked by a Sasquatch. And I loved writing that scene because he's trying so hard. He's going enemies to lovers, strangers to lovers. Some kind of romantic trope. He's gonna do it, and then a Sasquatch decides to say, "Nah, fam, you're in my spot. I'm mad. Now we're going to fight." And so he had that, and then post that fight, there was another scene as they're on their actual first date, because after you get in a fight with Sasquatch, that date's ruined. It's over, DOA. So their second date, or first date part two, as I like to say, they go into his favorite comic book store, and when they go into the comic book store, the clerk behind there is a satyr, and he's eating a tin can. And she's like, Emma's like, I didn't know that satyrs existed. I thought they were fairy tales. And he's just eating away. He's like, nah, we real. Just chewing on the tin can. And the reason I love that scene so much is because it's actually from my screenplay, I Just Work Here. I Just Work Here is a Clerks-inspired comedy that I based my time in hospitality on. And because I was like, okay, I'm not going to get that filmed anytime soon, I want the characters to live somehow. So I took the location and main characters of I Just Work Here and put it as a backdrop of the first date of Unbalanced and Unprepared. kind of like a Cambron verse.
Right. Um, what? Okay, sorry for brevity, because for the sake of the video that I have to make afterwards, I have to try to keep this relatively short. I've got to crunch this into 10 minutes somehow. By the way, per TikTok standards.
Oh, okay.
I do want to still ask the final question, because it's really important to me, and I think it's really important to the people that want to buy your book and want to know more about you as an author. What advice would you give as an experienced author to aspiring authors who want to publish their first book? Now, we're talking about people that have no alpha, that have no experience in the field, that are either just writing their first page, their first chapter, or are almost at that point of being done. Aside from persistence, like, yes, they have to keep at it, they have to keep trying. What would you say to those people that are sitting down and they're just against themselves and their heads against the wall and they just don't know how to finish?
Write when you're inspired, read when you're uninspired. Stephen King said that, and it stuck with me. But other than that, write the story that you truly want to read. Because if you are you're in the bookstore, you're in Barnes and Nobles, you're in Books A Million, you're in an indie bookstore, you're browsing through the shelves of the genre that you like, and nothing is catching your eye. You have a feeling for a story that you want to read but doesn't exist. You need to write that. Because if you want to write that, if you want to read it, others want to read it. So you got to take it upon yourself to write it, and write it the way you want. Don't worry about the market. That's what number one thing everyone is always worried about. It's like, oh, how am I going to get an agent if the market is going to want this? Yeah, the agents want what's for the market. That's their job. You are the creative. You are the writer. You are a god in this in your own world that you created. Be that god. Be the story. Write that story that you want to read, so others can read it for you. That will want it. Create that fandom. Don't chase what's after the market. Don't be the millionth Twilight.
Awesome.
Don't be the
Awesome. Awesome.
You had to do like 10 minutes, and here I am trying to tell people to be
No,
gods.
you're good.
But yeah,
No,
that's
you're good. That was a great little capstone to that, man. That was write when you're inspired and read when you're uninspired. Stephen King. You're a god, Wes Cambron. So those are your two quotes. If you're going to take any away from this meeting, take those away. It's great advice.